Brian May, the unyielding force behind Queen, the architect of the Red Special, crafted a sound that became a timeless hymn, etching his name into the immortal annals of music. More than a guitarist, he's a titan of creativity and intellect, a trailblazer whose brilliance radiates from rock's grandest stages to the boundless enigmas of the cosmos. His genius has reverberated through arenas, his melodies have mended countless shattered spirits, and his presence stands as a living testament to endurance and grandeur. Yet, even icons harbor shadows. The crushing loss of Freddie Mercury, the heartbreak of a marriage in ruins, the despair of illness that stalked and tormented him. And just when the world thought the tempest had subsided, peace seemingly restored, a seismic shock at 78 left fans reeling in disbelief. What befell Brian May will rend your heart. Before we dive in, hit that like button as a tribute to this storm-scarred life. Greatness often emerges from the humblest corners. In a modest Hampton Hill home in Middlesex, silence clung to the walls, weightier than any ovation he'd later command. On July 19, 1947, Brian Harold May entered a world of stability but not extravagance, love but not wealth. An only child, he had no siblings to share his days, no chorus of joy to pierce the quiet. Loneliness, sharp and unrelenting, left deep marks, honing his inner universe. His companions weren't brothers or sisters, but the echoes of solitude, the restless pulse of imagination, and the steady hands of his father, Harold, an engineer, and his mother, Ruth, the anchor of their understated home. They weren't poor, but life was lean, devoid of opulence, stripped of sheen. When Brian yearned for an electric guitar, buying one was out of reach. Instead, his father stood resolute beside him. Together, they crafted the legendary Red Special from scraps of wood, an old fireplace frame, and wires salvaged from forgotten machines. That guitar wasn't mere wood and wire. It was a bond forged in love, a defiance of scarcity, the first true cry of a boy who felt achingly unheard. At school, his brilliance only widened the chasm. He excelled in math and physics, earning teachers' praise, but each victory distanced him from peers. While others laughed on playgrounds, Brian stood apart, too introspective, too tethered to his own constellation of thoughts. Silence hounded him, unyielding, until music became his voice, fierce enough to shatter it. At 17, in the mid-1960s, he formed his first band, fittingly called 1984, carrying the haunting blend of isolation and resolve that shaped his youth. Decades later, he'd reflect that the Red Special was the voice of my spirit, built with my father's hands. Those words capture the core of Brian May's origins, not a tale of ease, but of quiet struggles, piercing restraint, and a creativity bold enough to transform silence into thunder. From Hampton Hill stillness, his path led to Imperial College in 1966, at just 19, balancing hefty physics texts and the melodies of the Red Special. He delved into light, space, and cosmic laws, but when classes ended, his fingers always found the guitar, the one voice that turned years of solitude into sound. Science and music weren't adversaries. They flowed in harmony, each fueling his strength as he pondered which would claim his destiny. By 1968, at 21, he'd earned a physics degree and ventured into astrophysics research. But music's call grew louder. London's grind demanded he teach, take odd jobs, and pour every penny into his passion. It was a tightrope walk of grit and stamina, but it kept his dream alive. In those years, fate dealt its cards. With fellow student Roger Taylor, he formed Smile, channeling youthful fire into gigs that rocked tiny clubs. The band had heart, but lacked a spark, as if destiny held back the final flame. That flame ignited in 1970 when 23-year-old Brian met Freddie Mercury. Freddie's audacity, vision, and voice reshaped the group in a heartbeat. For Brian, It was as if a fragment of his own soul had strode onto the stage. By 1971, at 24, John Deacon's understated genius on bass completed the quartet. Four distinct souls, united in purpose, stood poised to craft something greater than themselves. They were no longer just students or dreamers. They were Queen. With their rise came the promise of glory, but also a shadow they couldn't yet grasp. Reflecting back, every hardship seemed to forge Brian for this moment. The solitude of childhood, the rigor of science, the lean London nights, all honed his resilience. What seemed like chance meetings were the deliberate steps of fate, uniting four spirits to redefine the world. For Brian May, the young physicist who lived in galaxies and guitars, this was the true dawn, the ascent of Queen and the first whispers of storms yet to break. From fragile roots in small venues and uncertain futures, Queen exploded onto the global stage with unstoppable force. In 1975, a night at the opera shattered conventions, and with it came Bohemian Rhapsody, a song so bold, so otherworldly, so majestic it rewrote rock's possibilities. Brian stood, guitar in hand, weaving sonic tapestries that would resonate for ages as the band shouldered a million dreams. Yet, behind the curtain, a grimmer reality loomed. Grueling schedules, punishing tours, and the demand for perfection left wounds no applause could mend. Brian later confessed those years drained him, broke him, a man who gave all on stage, only to crumble in private silence. He called it living two lives, one radiant under spotlights, the other gasping in shadows. It was exhausting. It was heartbreaking. Yet, amid the strain, his creativity soared. His songs became Queen's most enduring echoes. We Will Rock You wasn't just an anthem. It was his bid to give crowds a pulse, a rhythm to march alongside the band. Save Me bore the raw ache of a soul teetering on collapse. And Who Wants to Live Forever, penned in 1986 for Highlander, was, as Brian admitted, a song born in tears, resonating with tragic beauty, a lament against mortality itself. He'd later say it felt channeled from another realm, a grief I hadn't yet faced. Those lyrics cast shadows over the band's triumphs, hinting at losses soon to devastate them. The zenith came on July 13, 1985, at Live Aid, before nearly 2 billion eyes. Queen delivered what's still hailed as rock's greatest live performance. Brian's guitar roared through Wembley as Freddie commanded with otherworldly brilliance. For one fleeting hour, the world united in their sound. Brian later called it beyond anything we'd ever felt, but admitted a gnawing fear. How could any band match such perfection? That triumph, though eternal, bore a weight. The higher they soared, the heavier the fall that loomed. Behind the glory lay sacrifice, endless flights, sleepless nights, fame's quiet toll gnawing at Brian's spirit. He spoke of feeling alone, even amid thousands, a loneliness sharpened by applause demanding invincibility. The anthems masked exhaustion, and the band's unity, unshakable on stage, quaked under offstage pressures. He later reflected, "Fame gave us everything, but stole pieces we never reclaimed." Looking back, Brian's mark shaped Queen's triumphs and their darkest undercurrents. His anthems lifted stadiums to ecstasy, yet his ballads whispered sorrow and yearning. This duality mirrored those years, glory so vivid it dazzled, shadows so deep they foretold heartbreak. For Brian May, the climb wasn't just about fame. It was survival, a trial of body and soul, a victory forged in exhaustion and sacrifice. Those immortal notes carry not just triumph, but the echoes of pain that gave them depth. As Wembley's echoes and Live Aid's thunder still rippled, shadows gathered in Brian's life. Fame had elevated him to dizzying heights, but storms loomed that no spotlight could dispel. In 1988, the first blow struck with crushing force. His mother, Ruth, passed away. At 41, At fame's peak, Brian felt stripped bare. For a man who'd poured his soul into a guitar alongside his father, losing the woman who anchored his life was a wound no ovation could salve. It wasn't just grief, it was guilt that gutted him. He later confessed that years on tour, consumed by Queen's relentless grind, robbed him of time with family. I was gone too much, he admitted. When it mattered, I wasn't there. The cruelty lay in the contrast. On stage, his guitar thundered, defiant, eternal. Off stage, silence greeted him, the voice he'd never hear again. Between Wembley's roar and a hospital room's quiet, he'd missed her final breath. He never forgave himself. Every note carried absence, every cheer a reminder of who couldn't share it. No encore could bring her back. In hotel rooms worldwide, far from home, time itself seemed to punish him, a son arriving too late to a door forever shut. That same year, another storm hit. His marriage to Chrissy Mullen, what in 1974, mother of his 3 children, Jimmy, Louisa, and Emily Ruth, collapsed. Their story began with youthful hope, a humble London home, a dream still tender. Early years held joy, Jimmy's first embrace, Louisa's giggles, Emily's arrival in 1987. For a time, family and music seemed reconcilable. But as Queen became a global juggernaut, balance slipped. Endless tours, nights in distant cities, fame's pressure, and Brian's inner turmoil eroded their bond. By the mid-1980s, distance wasn't just miles, it was silence. Chrissy felt like a stranger in her own marriage, watching Brian give his best to crowds, leaving fragments for home. Their children felt his absence too. Jimmy once asked why his father belonged more to the world than them. Brian confessed stepping off stage to thousands' roars, only to face empty rooms haunted by what he was losing. The loneliness was unbearable, the hollowness heavier with every ovation. The 1988 divorce, alongside his mother's death, was ruin upon ruin. Chrissy took the children, leaving Brian in a home once alive with laughter, now echoing silence. To the world, he was adored, untouchable. Within, he was a father halved, weighed by guilt for missed bedtimes and milestones. No song could bridge that gap. No encore could restore them. At glory's peak, his home lay in ashes. By the late 1980s, Queen's music still roared globally, but behind the scenes, a darker truth unfolded. Freddie Mercury, once the stage's blazing heart, was fading under AIDS's cruel weight, a disease bearing both pain and stigma. Yet Freddie faced it with near-mythic defiance. Brian watched, helpless, as the man who lit up arenas grew frail, yet still strode on stage with fire. On stage, Freddie was majestic, his voice soaring, his presence commanding. Off stage, the cost was brutal. For Brian, it was torture, watching his brother, his musical soulmate, unravel. Just 6 years earlier, at Live Aid, they'd conquered the world together. Freddie, fire incarnate, with Brian's guitar thundering beside him. To recall that glory while seeing Freddie struggle to stand was like watching a star collapse. Brian later called those years his hardest, a void never filled. As Freddie's illness worsened, the band rallied around him, guarding every fragile moment. Recording sessions shrank, carved around his fading strength, yet the music they made burned with raw intensity. Brian recalled the day a frail Freddie insisted on recording the show must go on. Pale, weakened, he said, "I'll do it, darling," and nailed it in one take. Brian remembered, still shaken years later. It was farewell and triumph, a hero giving his last to the world, a friend sealing his legacy. Then, on November 24th, 1991, at Garden Lodge, the fight ended. Freddie, just 45, the voice that set stadiums ablaze, was gone. For the world, a legend died. For Brian, his heart broke. He lost not just a singer, but half his voice, the partner who gave his guitar life. Freddie's unwritten songs, unconquered stages, and burning dreams were silenced. No science, song, or prayer could stop it. Brian later said, "I still hear him, but he's not there." The funeral, private and quiet, held only family and close friends, grief too deep for words. Brian stood silent, head bowed, later confessing, "I lost my closest friend, and I couldn't speak." Outside, London mourned. Thousands filled streets with flowers, photos, notes, and candles. Pavements vanished under roses, fences under pictures of a smiling Freddie. The city became a shrine, strangers weeping, singing Bohemian Rhapsody, and "We Are the Champions" through tears. It was a cathedral of love, proof Freddie's voice touched millions. For Brian, the days blurred in despair. Reporters swarmed, headlines screamed, but he sank into a private abyss. Depression so crippling that music felt meaningless. He wondered if he could go on. Freddie's death wasn't just an era's end. It was a lesson in grief's cruelty, brilliance's fragility, and humanity behind anthems. It reshaped every note Brian would play, a wound that lingered in Queen's haunting years. Freddie's echo never left Brian's guitar, a voice death couldn't silence. After Freddie's death, darkness didn't just engulf Queen, it consumed Brian. Depression gripped him, a void so deep living felt unbearable. Applause rang hollow, his guitar silent without Freddie's fire. He admitted, "I thought about ending it. I didn't want to be here." For a guitarist hailed as a legend, this was the unseen battle, a storm that nearly broke him. Years passed, music slowly a lifeline, but grief's scars remained. In 2013, at 66, another storm hit. Doctors flagged possible prostate cancer. Memories of Freddie's illness surged back, haunting him. Dread consumed him, sleepless nights, hospital corridors, waiting for results that could rewrite his life. Scans, biopsies, and tests reminded him of his fragility. He feared not just death, but leaving his music, wife Anita, and children unfinished. "I kept thinking of Freddie," he said, "wondering if this was my turn." The all-clear brought relief like silence after a storm, but fear left its mark. Brian changed, adopting a healthier diet, exercise, and constant checkups, treasuring health's fragile gift. In 2020, amid a global pandemic, his body betrayed him again. A gardening mishap tore a hip muscle, triggering sciatica so severe he described it as a knife in his back. Pain was relentless, robbing sleep, movement, breath.